So to kick off this panel, it's best to hear about these companies straight from your guys' mouth instead of mine. So Daniel, we might start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your business and how it came into this world?
Yeah, sure. So EcoShield Systems is an R&D company developing solutions to mitigate urban overheating and biodiversity loss in high-density cities. And we've developed a low-carbon scaffold to graft novel ecosystems onto buildings. It came about from my background in architecture, landscape architecture and urban design. I'm the co-founder. My other co-founder was actually a client who wanted to do this extravagant house hanging off the edge of a sandstone cliff in an Angofra forest overlooking a remnant bushland and a national park surrounded by a lot of mansions. And obviously the neighbours were furious about this. Mm-hmm. So what does any young, arrogant, naive architect do? Propose a new technology that doesn't exist. And we attempted to graft a cliff ecosystem onto the building so that the building was an extension of the cliff. And that solved that client's needs, but in the process we realized that there was no products in the market to deliver this technology, and there was an opportunity for us to develop and enter that market.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so are you, give us a sense of kind of where that fits into the ecosystem now. Like, are there a lot of other organizations that are kind of working on retrofitting of buildings or?
Yeah, sure. So when we went to find a supplier, we found that there weren't many suppliers in the vertical greening space. And that led us to develop this new typology of vertical greening systems. So there's no real competitors on the market that are doing what we're doing. And we're currently in the final stages of verification testing with the Botanic Gardens.
Excellent. Tim, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So Telematica is building a smarter and more resilient future for rail transportation by automating what would otherwise be manual inspections of the rail infrastructure. And the way that we do that is through fitting sensors to regular in-service trains and using the trains then as a platform to be able to report back on the condition of the infrastructure that they're running on. And that allows for a more efficient and safer and more reliable form of rail transport, which is vital to the economy and to society at large. And I guess to make that a bit more concrete for people to understand, this is our first product that we've deployed to over 25 rail organisations globally. And it involves fitting accelerometers, a camera and a GPS to the top of the train called the pantograph. And what we do is we detect locations where the pantograph is hitting on damaged overhead wiring. And when that happens, we'll offboard a short video along with the location of where that's happened. And that'll be reported to maintainers in a dashboard, and they'll be able to make maintenance decisions on problems that are evolving across the network, and in the worst cases, prevent the train from becoming entangled in the overhead wiring, which can cause millions of dollars in damage and delay trains for up to 24 hours.
So can you tell us a little bit about kind of where that technology originated?
Yeah, sure. So Tom and myself both met at UCID, both engineers, so technical co-founders, and both started our careers in the rail industry. And then we got this really unique insight into some of the problems facing the rail industry and saw this opportunity to disrupt maintenance practices that have been done the same way for a very, very long time, as well as this opportunity to leverage a lot of new IoT technologies that were starting to come onto the market and leverage those to build the types of products that we could see making a big difference to the industry.
Great. Ruby, over to you and Aquila.
Yeah, Aquila. I mean, as you said, Rupal, Aquila is a light beam transmission company, which, to put it into terms that are easily understandable by everybody in the crowd, we're essentially taking what we know and we see on everyday rooftops, where we have the sun put into solar panels and it converts into electricity, but we're actually recreating that in a entirely controlled environment. I feel like there is some other person who wants to jump in on
we're
this.
okay now.
Well,
say your last sentence again. I was a little bit distracted.
That's okay. Yeah, we're essentially recreating what you see on your roofs every day, but in a controlled way. You can actually see the render up here, which shows our system. That light is actually completely invisible, but what our technology allows us to do is actually transmit electricity wirelessly and dynamically over extended distances. So it completely unlocks the energy transmission system that we have today.
And are you kind of well ahead of the curve? Are other people doing this?
Yeah, it's not something that other people are doing. Most of the time when people think about directed light, it's in the form of weaponry, which is the key innovation of Aquila is that we're actually making this very safe, so a little bit different in that front. The energy transmission system is very behind the times in terms of innovation and regulatory environment, which I'm sure we'll get to later, and so this is a huge unlock.
Great. I want to kind of open up the first question as a segue from Finding Infinity. We're finally waking up to the reality that we have to learn how to live harmoniously with nature. Language, of course, helps frame that narrative. We've proposed a new epoch called the Symbiocene, which I love, but is perhaps aspirational rather than reflective of the kind of current environment. We've well and truly adopted the terminology net zero, but Daniel, can you tell me a little bit about the terminology of net positive? We heard Finding Infinity mentioned it a couple times. Has this language started making it into the lexicon?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of a difficult question in some regards. Basically, because the global construction sector is shifting, or the landscape is shifting so dramatically because of global forces. The drive for net positive is somewhat on a rocky road. Mm-hmm. Net positive is basically the consideration of any project beyond the economic bottom line to consider natural, social impacts and so on. And so I can't really speak for the industry because we're only a small startup, but in my experience, the change in the narrative is occurring at the governmental level, at the policy level. Mm-hmm. It is beginning to filter through, but the translation is going to be quite difficult because of the practicalities of delivering projects for budgets and so on. But I think that the city of Melbourne is probably leading the charge in terms of greening cities and nature positive cities. And our sponsors, Wholesome, are leading the charge probably from the supplier's point of view with their accelerating green growth strategy to become nature positive.
Might go back to Sally's original point about putting a value on impact. And so, finding the cost to support that is difficult. Tim, I remember first talking about the Internet of Things probably in the early 2000s. We've had huge leap in microprocessors and sensors and better Bluetooth and edge computing. What does the future of a true Internet of Everything really look like? And does it feel different than it does today?
Yeah, I think conceptually, an Internet of Everything is about seamless integration between the physical and digital world. Practically, what that means is a world where we can operate at unprecedented levels of efficiency and reliability. And so I think it's probably not necessarily this incredibly different and futuristic world that you might think of immediately, but more a lot of today's inconveniences fading away into the background. So, trains that run on time all the time, cars that never break down and cause traffic jams, and more and more just our daily inconveniences becoming a thing of the past due to the fact that we can now understand the condition of any part of our built environment.
Mm-hmm. And the last kind of future question before we get into something kind of a little bit more tangible and for today. Ruby, we're in a much more connected world. Talking about things like mobile penetration and satellite internet is already, a bit outdated. But the built infrastructure, like wires and poles, of course, is much more expensive, policy issues, ongoing operational costs. Can you talk about the potential opportunities that infrared long-distance charging has for hard-to-reach areas like disaster areas, remote areas, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. Our grid infrastructure globally is, as you say, poles and wires, these often take decades or more to develop, and billions of dollars. They also cause a lot of inconvenience. If you're a landholder that has a piece of grid line that's planned across your land, you know, you're going to lose access to that land. There's always like a lot of back and forth. That takes a long time in order to develop these agreements. I'm a renewable engineer and used to work in renewable development, and so the grid is the number one thing that is holding us back in terms of renewable acceleration and us being able to actually access a completely clean grid and clean energy. But what it also means is that we are constrained locally to what our poles and wires can access. And energy storage and energy transportation is a thing that is commonly talked about all the time, you know, because we're constrained by battery weight and energy density and all the rest of it. So if we have the capacity to actually transmit energy in a wireless manner, like what Aquila can provide, it gives us the opportunity to kind of go from dial-up internet into Wi-Fi in that same transition that we've seen with internet, but on an energy scale. So you can direct invisible beam of light upwards. You can create relay systems to the other side of Australia and connect up Perth and Sydney, or a renewable energy hub in the middle of Australia to a green hydrogen hub on the coastline. And equivalently, if we have $0 energy in the middle of the day in Australia, you can get that to America, where they're in the maximum power demand, or into an area that has no access to energy at the moment. So it really does unlock all of those elements of energy insecurity, both on the renewable energy side and whether you actually have access to energy side.
Mm-hmm. So we just need all that clean energy to service that increase in demand.
Absolutely.
So this brings me to kind of my next question, which is, you know, how can government, we have a range of different types of businesses here. Some are retrofitting businesses and some are, you know, totally kind of creating something new. And you guys will all be playing probably somewhere in between over the maturity of your organization. Ruby, I might start with you. You were talking about how the grid is kind of the roadblock right now, but you're starting with something new. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of that, you know, you were calling lily padding approach?
Yeah, absolutely. The grid is sort of the roadblock for renewable energies. They have to plug into the grid to put their energy somewhere, and the grid wasn't built for renewables. So right now there's a struggle there. With Aquila, we see that obviously you're working with quite high powers, and there's a hugely regulated environment when it comes to the energy grid in and of itself. So what we do to start off with is we charging drones from afar. It's a very hard to reach place, a drone, because it's in the air as such. It needs power, and if we can charge that while it's in the air, it becomes very useful for those that are using drones over long distances. So that lily padding approach we kind of have put in place, we've done so with an interest to develop our reliability and the proof cases of this very new technology at an innovative industry, which is the drones are moving very fast. So it's good to start there and lily pad up to, you know, relay systems that are local, and then international relay systems, and getting into space and such and forth. Mm-hmm. But I know that, Tim, you've done some really interesting work in China. You've had to jump straight into the highly regulated environment, unlike us.
Yeah. I mean, retrofitting sensors to hard to reach places is definitely something that you know, you need to understand the environment that you're fitting them into, and one of the big challenges is always power and how do you power those sensors. And I think that there's a lot of new technologies coming out for that, such as what Aquila is doing. And also, you know, how do you collect data off those sensors, and a lot of new technologies in that space as well. Companies like Morse Micro, which is an Australian company that's doing a new Wi-Fi chip, and we're seeing a lot of evolution in both those areas.
Mm-hmm. Any issues in terms of kind of, you know, you're talking about data, any kind of, maybe any of you can kind of answer this, but any issues that you're facing in terms of like regulatory hurdles that are a hindrance to acceptance of the technology?
I think maybe like I can go first just on that one, because the regulatory environment for us is definitely evolving in terms of how much focus, I mean, rail organisations specifically have on cybersecurity and data collection practices. I think one encouraging thing that we see is that it is so far taking quite a measured approach to the data that we collect being sensitive, but not necessarily a matter of national security. And I think that it's been quite measured in terms of how the government are taking an approach that's appropriate for the type of data that we're collecting, and I hope that doesn't change as the regulation continues to evolve in this space.
Daniel, I'm going to jump to you. How can government incentivize the adoption of these of your solution? I know you're saying the City of Melbourne is leading the way here. How did you start that relationship, and is there anything you can do to kind of, unlock that approach for other cities?
Yeah, so Singapore is really the pioneer, and then Melbourne is leading the way in Australia, and Brisbane's following close behind. I think that from a policy level, there is a lot of impetus to affect change and to green buildings and to green our cities. The real challenge is just around the economics and making the business case stack up, and getting the technology to be reliable and to be able to maintain it, which is one of the key innovations of our systems, reducing the maintenance cost by suspending it away from the building. And basically we're recreating the business case for it around improving amenity and productivity. And it's the reconnection of people with nature, and the residents of buildings or the occupants of office buildings, and reconnecting with them with nature has tremendous productivity benefits, and that's really what's driving the economic model. So I think the policy is in place, the community wants it, and it's just a matter of people in our industry meeting that demand.
Yeah, and there definitely is a growing public awareness about this reconnection to the nature. You're seeing it kind of all the time in the media and so forth.
Yeah, and particularly after COVID, I think that was a good sort of real live experiment into the impacts of disconnecting people with nature.
I'm going to jump into a totally different topic, which is about hiring. Do any of you have any issues with hiring? How's your hiring been? What sort of kind of markets are you looking at? Are you looking internationally? Ruby, I might start with you.
Yeah, I mean, as a deep tech company and as a hardware company, I'm sure a lot of people will connect with the reality that it is sometimes very hard to find the right people for very highly technical and specific roles, because there's only so many people in Sydney, let alone Australia, let alone the world, that is able to fulfill the kind of roles that we're looking for, very sort of specific technical niches. That is where we have trouble. I mean, once we find them, it's fantastic. It's just about actually getting the word out, I suppose, that the roles exist to the right people is what we struggle with.
Kind of you have that niche technical need, but also kind of opening up people who have that technical need up to joining a startup, right? And kind of having that scrappy approach is probably tricky as well.
I think the roles that we hire for are a lot more generalist than Ruby, so we probably don't have the same challenges in finding a very specific type of role. But at the same time, for any startup, I think hiring's always on the top 1 to 3 things that you're concerned about at any given point in time. So it's definitely something that we're always thinking about.
And our challenge is the multidisciplinary nature of trying to create novel ecosystems. There are a lot of different disciplines involved, and as a startup, it's really hard to find the package of people who have those specialised skills across so many disciplines. If there's a startup that can clone a human, I'd be the first to clone my chief technical officer, Anton. I need about 10 of him. That's the challenge for us.
You guys need to connect up with the Finding Infinity guys. I bet there's some good people and synergies there. We just have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to have you all close on, perhaps, Daniel, we'll start with you. Close on kind of maybe a nice story of the deployment of your solution.
We had quite a beautiful moment just recently when we were relocating our prototype that has been in place for 6 years, and we discovered that there were 3 eastern whipbird nests in there. So the whipbirds have been nesting in there for the past 3 years, and there were also signs that the diamond python had also been nesting in there. So we've kind of got the first evidence of this novel, stable ecosystem occurring, and that was quite a beautiful moment.
That's amazing. Tim?
I think for us, there's been a couple of times in the last few years where we've detected issues with the infrastructure that have been really at a critical stage where if we hadn't have detected them in that timely fashion, it would have resulted in a major incident occurring and ultimately like a city full of people not making it home on time or making it to work on time. And when those types of things happen and we get the feedback from the customers that they have prevented a major incident, it's pretty awesome to think that you have actually made a really, really big difference in a way that no one's noticed. Everyone's just got to go home and gone about their lives, but as a result of the work that we're doing.
It's interesting because maintenance isn't necessarily sexy or get all the glamour.
You don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
Like it's only when there's a problem that you do. So
yeah. So did Telematica get the cred for that?
Oh yeah, our customers are obviously happy to spruik us internally, but I mean, for them the win is that they're not in the news.
Yeah. Yeah, great. And Ruby, what does the world look like when Aquila has been fully adopted?
I mean, when we're able to have fully wireless energy, it will kind of make energy feel like mobile data is what we're accelerating towards. Like what we have now in terms of the energy system is just miles behind what we could, and I think it's a very natural path of progression that we can all see, based off what we've seen with so many other technologies in the world, that energy's next. So looking forward to it.
Great. Well, amazing stuff. Everyone give it up for Ruby, Daniel, and Tim.